Hi there, welcome back. Thank you for joining us. In this video, we are going to discuss the general differences between the kings and the queens, and then we're going to discuss the differences between the court, queens and kings versus the empress and the emperor, and then we'll get into more detailed differences between the court, queens, and kings per their individual suits. So to begin, we're going to talk a little bit about the general differences between the queens and the kings, the court cards. So the queens typically represent a receptive inner authority. The queens represent the inner world, emotional intelligence, intuition, and mastery of self-expression. They symbolize nurturing, development, support, maturity, and the embodiment of their element. Their power is influence-based and is often quiet, magnetic, and responsive. And they're associated with the element of water, making them emotionally attuned and inwardly reflective even within their individual suit element. So, for example, the Queen of Wands would be like the water element of fire, and the Queen of Wands would be like the water of air. So it's associated with the element of water, the queens, and making them emotionally attuned and inwardly reflective even within their individual suit element. The keywords for the queens include receptivity, embodiment, maturity through experience, inner knowing, caretaking, mentoring, and passive leadership. When it comes to the kings represent directive, outer authority, and they represent the outer world, and also structure, intellectual mastery, and leadership over an element. The kings symbolize control, mastery, direction, and the outward expression of a suit's energy. Their power is command-based, action-oriented, and assertive. The kings are associated with the element of air, giving them mental clarity, decisiveness, and authority. So, like how the queens are the water element of their individual suit, the king is the air element of their individual suit. So, the King of Wands would be like the air, fire. And then King of Kings or the King of Swords would be air, and so forth. The keywords for kings include direction, governance, execution of power, logical strategy, public presence, and active leadership. So what's the difference between the court cards of the queen and kings versus the empress and the emperor? So the empress is like the queen of all the queens, and the emperor is like the king of all the kings. The empress, which is the major arcana card number 3, is the archetype of the divine feminine and creation, fertility, sensuality, and unconditional nurturing. She is not just a woman or a mother, but the mother. And the Empress is deeply tied to nature, birth, and abundance, and she symbolizes what is grown and nurtured over time. She's not limited to one element, such as the other queens. She embodies the earthly expression of divine creativity. So she's like the goddess. The main differences from the queens is that the queens embody a mature version of their individual element, but the Empress is the source, a universal symbol of feminine energy. The Empress creates life, beauty, and wholeness, while the queens nurture or manage what's already been created. When it comes to the Emperor, that's Major Arcana card number 4. This is the archetype of the divine masculine. Structure, order, leadership, protection, and authority. He doesn't just lead, he establishes law, legacy, and dominion. He's tied to Aries, which is ruled by Mars, so that represents strategy, being assertive, and foundational. The Emperor symbolizes external control, civilization, and patriarchal lineage. The main difference from the kings is that the kings rule within a defined territory or suit, but the emperor stabilizes all-encompassing rulership. So now we're going to get into the individual queens and kings. So of the wands, which is the element of fire, with the wands, the queen represents passion, will, and creativity. The Queen of Wands is magnetic, sensual, socially radiant, confident in her femininity, leads by inspiring others and embracing visibility, and nurtures passion in others and supports creative growth. Whereas the King of Wands, I think I mentioned that Queen of Wands represents passion and will and creativity, but it's both the Queen and the King of Wands that represent passion, will, and creativity. So the King of Wands is charismatic. He's a visionary. He's authoritative. He leads with bold decisions and forward thinking. He commands respect and inspires loyalty, and he creates long-term plans and executes them. What's the key difference? The Queen expresses fire through magnetism and presence, while the King expresses fire through vision and leadership. So when it comes to the cups, which is the element of water, the King and the Queen represent emotion, intuition, and relationship. The Queen of Cups represents being deeply intuitive, nurturing, and empathic. She holds emotional space. She's a healer or can be a counselor. The Queen of Cups can be private, dreamy, and deeply feeling, and she leads through emotional understanding. When it comes to the King of Cups, he is emotionally mature, calm, and diplomatic. He's a master of emotional regulation. He guides others with compassion but rarely reveals vulnerability, and he balances empathy with control. What's the key difference? The king or the queen dives into emotion to connect, while the king manages emotion to support others while remaining composed. So the king manages emotion to support others while also remaining composed. Next up is the swords, which is the element of air. The Queen and King of Swords represent intellect, truth, and communication. The Queen of Swords represents being sharp-minded, clear-spoken, and independent. She's a defender of truth and personal boundaries. She wields wisdom from experience and pain, and she's emotionally discerning, but not cold. The King of Swords is strategic, commanding, and mentally sharp. He makes fair and logical decisions. He upholds justice with clarity and strength, and he's detached yet authoritative. What's the key difference? The queen uses intellect to protect and discern, while the king uses intellect to rule and judge. Next and last, we have the pentacles, which is the element of earth. The Queen and the King of Pentacles represent stability, the material world, and practicality. The Queen of Pentacles is grounded, resourceful, and nurturing of body and home. She embodies abundance and domestic harmony. She balances work and caregiving, and she provides comfort, safety, and stability. The King of Pentacles is wealthy, successful, and materially secure. He commands legacy, investments, and growth. He's a practical leader and a disciplined provider, and he builds lasting systems. What's the difference? The queen cultivates nurturing abundance, while the king manages and expands material power. So, with all that being said, the queens and the kings mirror each other, but they process power differently. One from within, which is the queens, and the other from without, which is the kings. So the queens is internal, the kings is more external. They relate to their element internally or externally, depending on if it's the queen or the king. The Empress and the Emperor represent the cosmic archetypes beyond any domain. So it's a universal expression of creation and order. And that there is the queens and kings, the court cards, and the Empress and Emperor. Comment down below if you have any additional interpretations to add. Thank you so much for watching.